How to write an email. Part 1. The conventions of the genre. If you want to write an email in English, there are certain things that you must do. These are the conventions. In texts, just as in games, we can call these conventions moves. So the question is, in an email, what are the moves? Well, we can divide the moves into two kinds. We have the moves that are basically the same every time you write, and the moves that change depending on the purpose. The moves that are the same, we're going to call those framing moves. And the moves that do change, we'll call those content moves. In this part, we're going to be looking at the first, the framing moves. The framing moves consist of two large categories, opening and closing, and 5 subcategories. And this is language that's basically the same in all emails, no matter what you're writing about. This language is pretty formulaic, and to some extent you can just memorize much of this. So let's begin at the beginning, the subject line. So the subject is like a title. It's a summary of the content of the email. It helps the recipient is the receiver of the email. It helps the recipient decide whether or not to open the email. Is this spam? Is this a waste of time? It also helps the recipient to find the email at a later date. A blank email subject line creates a problem for the recipient. The subject line helps the recipient. And so this is a general strategy for making a request. Do not make the request itself a problem. In other words, minimize the imposition. You want to do everything you can to make it easy for the person to say yes. And if the recipient doesn't read the email because you haven't filled in the subject line, you're causing a problem. So the subject line is pretty simple, very similar to a title in many ways, and just like a title, we're going to leave it until the end to actually fill in. For now, we'll leave this blank. The first of the opening moves is the salutation. The salutation consists of 2 parts. The word dear and a title and surname. So let's look at some examples. Dear Mr. Smith is good. Dear Ms. Jones, this is also good. Dear Dr. Ames, this is also good. Let's have a look at some bad examples. Mr. Smith, we're missing a word here. Dear Teacher Jones, teacher is not a title. Dear Dr. John, where John is a first name. These are all bad examples, and these don't work in English. These are not polite, these are not standard salutations. After the salutation, you need to introduce yourself. For this, you want a simple strategy. You want to be formal and also specific. So this is your general strategy. So what do we mean by formal and specific? So for example, I'm fan. This is neither formal nor specific. This is not a good example. I'm fan yun. This is more formal and more specific. This is better. I'm fan yun, student number 0404040. That is more specific and therefore better still. And I'm fan yun, student number 0404040. I attend your pronunciation clinic on Thursday mornings is the best. And again, for the same reason that we are adding a subject line, telling someone exactly who you are makes the recipient's life a lot easier. So just like the subject line, the function of this is to minimize the imposition, to make life easier for the reader. Let's look at all these three in context. We have a missing subject line, but of course we shall come back to that later. We have Dear Ms. Recipient. My name is Jane Likes, student number 007007. I attend your morning class on English for Business Professionals. We have all of the opening moves. The last part is closing. Closing consists of two conventions. These are thanking and leave taking. So in an email request to faculty, thanking is probably the most common way you will close your email. There are many ways to say thank you, but by far the most useful way is just to say thank you. You can also say why you are thanking them. You can say thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention, but this is not necessary. Thank you is just enough. Finally, we have leave taking. These are less important than the thanking move and can be optional, and they're fairly personal depending on your style, but usually in professional communication we use a single standard message. Currently, regards is quite fashionable. It's polite, it's respectful, it's also very impersonal. You can also say best regards or kind regards, but it's not really necessary. After regards, you want to use your full name. So let's look at this whole thing together. We have an empty subject line right now. Remember, we will come back to that later. We have the salutation, Dear Ms. Recipient. We have our self-introduction, which is formal and specific. In the middle, we have the content moves. We will talk about that in the next part. Then we are thanking, a simple thank you, taking leave, regards, and finally our full name. So that's it. That's the basic template for most of your formal communication. If you want to write an email, it should look very similar to this. If it doesn't look like this, then you're breaking the convention. In the next part, we will look at these blue parts, the content.